This Week in Radio Tech, episode 294, is brought to you by Lavo and the Crystal Clear Virtual Radio Console. Crystal Clear is the console with a multi-touch touchscreen interface. By the Telos Zip 1 IP audio codec. Easy to use, and the Zip 1 automatically adapts to changing IP bandwidth. And by the Axia Fusion AOIP mixing console. Fusion, where design and technology become one. GatesAir traces its origins to 1922, when the Gates Radio Company was founded by Parker Gates. Rich Redmond, Chief Products Officer at GatesAir, joins Chris Tobin and me for updates on IP audio, HD radio transmitter upgrades, and efficient liquid-cooled FM transmitter technology. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. Glad to be here. Hey, I'm dressed nice today because I'm just off an SBE meeting. The Nashville SBE chapter met. We couldn't find a speaker, and so, they asked me to talk about streaming. Well, I'm the program chair. Maybe I asked me to talk about streaming. Anyway, we got it done, and that's why I'm dressed nice. So I'm glad I am, because I'm in good company. You're watching This Week in Radio Tech. It's our 294th episode. And our usual co-host, Chris Tobin, is with us, and also our guest, Rich Redmond, is with us. We'll get to Rich in just a second. Right now, let's head on over to the New York City area for the best-dressed engineer in radio, and that's Chris Tobin. Hey, Chris.
Hello, Kirk. Yes, I'm in a transmitter room, if you hadn't guessed. For those of you listening only, it is a transmitter room with two transmitters high atop of a skyscraper. This one, I think, we're at 4 Times Square. We're doing some work with HD radio and checking on the GPS antenna, which is up on the superstructure on the rooftop. So I'll be going up there shortly after the show.
Cool. And sometime, during this show today, we're going to talk a bit about HD radio, and specifically what what's available nowadays technology-wise to improve things, power levels, and just easier hookup and all that. And I want to get told about what role GPS plays in generating HD radio. I think I know, but hey, I have some small market stations. We don't have any HD radio yet in my markets. So I want to hear about that, Chris, if you would if you would pipe in at the right time with that information. All right. And so our guest today is Rich Redmond. Rich, welcome in. Glad you're here, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's great to join you.
So, Rich, I've known you for some time, back when you worked with when the company was called Harris Broadcast Division. And,
right.
It seems like we worked together on a few little HD radio projects here and there, although it was more of from a sales and marketing and promotion side and not from an actual hands-on side. So maybe today we'll get to talk about what's the latest in the hands-on part. So,
absolutely.
We're also going to talk transmitters, efficiency, IP codecs, and probably some console systems, too. So I want to hear about all that kind of stuff, whatever's going on at GatesAir these days. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to lead you on to say something. Our show is brought to you in part by the folks at Lavo, L-A-W-O. Lavo is a company that makes audio consoles, great big ones, but they also make a smaller line of consoles. Lavo makes the Crystal Clear audio console. This is a pretty interesting device, and we've been talking about it for about a year here on the show. This is the web page for the Crystal Clear. This is what you'll want to go check out if you're interested in this kind of technology. What it is, it's an audio console that uses a touchscreen as the user interface. Now, that means that they had to write an app that made the screen, made the console on the screen just right for putting your fingers on it and touching and moving. That means it is simplified, and that's good because it's a software-based audio console. So any button that you push, well, its response is contextual to what you're doing. You don't have to, go through a bunch of menus. There's not a second screen somewhere to help you go through menus. It's right there on the screen that you're touching. So, for example, if you want to run a fader up and down, no problem. Put your finger on the fader, run it up and down. It's a multi-touch touchscreen, so you can run 2 or 3 or 4. If it had 10 faders, you could run 10 faders up and down. It's a multi-touch touchscreen with 8 faders. It's got on and off buttons, of course, and options button that lets you set levels, control the mix minus, pan, and say pan, tilt, and zoom. Just all the usual functions you would have on a console are right there on the touchscreen on the Crystal Clear console from Lavo. Now, it consists of 2 parts. There's one part that goes in the rack, and that's a 1 rack unit box quiet as a mouse. You can plug a couple of microphones into it, more if you go through an external mic preamp. So it's got mic inputs, line inputs, AES, digital inputs and outputs. And then it's also got a network jack on it. And that network jack does a couple of things. First of all, it talks to the Surface, that is a multi-touch touchscreen monitor that's running the application that makes the console appear to you. It's the GUI, the graphical user interface. But it also talks Ravenna and AES67. So you can connect it up to other audio consoles, other peripherals, microphones, speakers, satellite receivers, things that will also generate or receive AES67. It's a pretty cool idea. And if touchscreen for control interests you, check it out. Now, if you go to the website at lawo.com and look for radio products and the crystal clear console, you'll find a video. There's the link to it. There's the little thumbnail in the upper right-hand corner. And that's Mike Dosh. He's the director of radio products there at Lavo, and he will run you through a little video that shows you all the features and benefits of the console. So don't take my word for it. Check it out with Mike Dosh, who I'm not sure he invented the console, but he had a great deal of input into how it works. Lavo, thanks very much for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, Kirk Harnack here, along with Chris Tobin. We're talking to Rich Redmond. Rich, this is your first time on the show, and I'm delighted that our schedules finally matched and we could get you on. Thanks again.
No, thanks for making some time. We're excited to be here.
So, Rich, I don't know. My full-time job is with Telos. I'm very focused on that kind of stuff. And so I'm probably missed some details about the transition from Harris Broadcast Division to what is now GatesAir. Can you walk us through a little bit of that and tell us how GatesAir came to be?
Yeah, sure. So for the longest time, for most people today, they knew of us as Harris. Really, the tradition started with Parker Gates, almost 100 years ago now in Quincy, Illinois, and that evolved to become part of Harris. And then in recent years, we just went by Harris and Harris Broadcast. And so a couple of years ago, we spun out of a Harris corporation, which was mostly a defense contractor, and became an independent company. And at that time, we had products for radio, which most of our radio customers would think of, whether it be studio products for mixing, switching, and routing, transport products, STLs, IP networks, and TDM networks, and then radio and TV transmitters. And in addition, there were a number of studio-type products for the video side, and there was playout automation and traffic and so forth. About almost 2 years ago now, we split the company and put the transmission and the radio products together, so radio and TV transmitters and the full line of networking and studio products for radio together. That's called GatesAir. And the other part of the company, which is really more software focused in the video and over the top side, is called Imagine Communications. So that's kind of where we started. And with the GatesAir name, it's almost like a return to the heritage with a little bit of homage to Parker Gates.
Gotcha. Yeah, I actually do love that. I think it's a great name that you guys picked when you spun off. So we got a number of technologies to talk about. Most folks, at least at the trade shows, I typically associate GatesAir with transmitters. But I'd like to hold off on talking about transmitters for just a few minutes because I'm interested in for example, where you guys have brought the Intraplex line along. That's a company that I think you guys acquired some years ago. You've kept the name and improved the product line. What can you tell us about what's exciting or happening in the Intraplex line that so many engineers depend upon?
Yeah, that's a great question. The Interplex line for the longest times really stood for rock solid reliability when it comes to connections. So whether it was over like a TDM network or later an IP network, you kind of plugged it in. It was your link from the studio to the transmitter, or in some cases, some of our network customers use it to get a remote morning show or a talk program into the satellite uplink. And in recent years, we've really spent a lot of time on IP-based connectivity. And the real key was, as you guys know, right, a TDM network's reliability is a little bit different than an IP network, and you've got to pay attention to some things to make sure you can get similar results. So whether it be things like the stream splicing technology we use, whether it be our Synchrocast technology for seamless SFN networks, all that stuff's really migrated to IP, and we can do that across our We have a NetExpress platform, which is kind of a card cage-based larger network platform that works on an IP network and TDM networks. Or really the key product today is the IP link, and it comes in a couple different flavors, but you can do multiple channels, software-defined audio codecs. It's got very robust forward error correction, as well as multiple stream splicing and multicast capability. So we've spent a lot of time on getting that as a tool that's both cost effective, but get you that same rock solid link that if you had an STL Plus before over like a T1 network, you'll get the same type of network reliability using IP link over a much more flexible and cost effective IP network. So that, and then we also have a 950 STL. So for here in the US, people who are looking to put audio over a 950 link, we've got a product called HD Link that works, quite well, and you can get quite a bit of payload. We can get about 3.2 megabits across a 950 link. Whoa. Where you can stack up. Yeah, when you pack IP links with it, we can get 20 sets of stereo channels across the link using like an Opus codec. So a lot of flexibility for guys who want to get content from here to there.
Yeah, wow, yeah. Hey, I of course was familiar for years with the Interplex line and knew that as something that only worked with TDM, T1s, E1, that kind of thing.
Right.
But you have IP cards available for that now as well, so they can work over IP connections. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, if you had a traditional TDM based like an STL Plus, we actually have a card, a CM30 card you can plug in, use the same shelf, and transition to IP. So you don't need to rewire all the audio. You don't need to change your configuration. You can simply change the network it's on.
Gotcha. And isn't it true that hey, Rich, I talked to you earlier today. I've always worked for little peanut whistle radio stations, smaller ones, and Interplex was just not something that was going to be in the cards for this type of stations I worked at. And I know you have smaller customers as well, but I do tend to find these more in the medium and larger markets. So with the card cage philosophy of the Interplex products, and even going into today's products, you have different types of data cards there, right? Can't you get a VoIP connection or a some kind of data connection or GPI? I don't know. There are other things that you can do besides just have the audio from here to there.
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, a lot of times there really were big stations that started with the card cage based TDM multiplexers, and you had linear program audio and compressed audio and ring down circuits for phones and so forth, and GPI. What's happened over time is with advancements in software and hardware development, a lot of that capability is now packed into real cost-effective 1RU IP codecs. So like the IP Link 100 is a very cost-effective 2-channel stereo. It comes with some standard capabilities for GPI connectivity. You can pipe over a VPN for IP tunneling. You've got some other RS-232 connections that you can send. So to your original point, yeah, a lot of times we were in the larger markets with bigger customers. And now what we found with IP Link is we can really cost effectively get content, whether you're doing a, like a morning show or a talk program or some program you're trying to set up a network on that you're not quite ready for satellite yet. With our multicast capability, it's very cost effective for program distribution, or if it's just a link to your transmitter site. So we really cover both ends of the spectrum with that. Great product line, very cost effective with a lot of capabilities today.
It seems like about a year ago, and Chris Tobin, you may have seen this too. I was able to attend an NAB paper, and I believe it was your engineers, Junius Kim, and I'm not sure how to pronounce his name.
Keir Parikh. Yeah,
Keir Parikh, yeah. And they gave this paper on the role of network packet loss modeling in reliable transport of broadcast audio. That's a big title, but it's pretty important stuff to be able to model when packets are lost across an IP network. What does that usually look like, and how can we mitigate that? Is that basically what the paper's about?
Yeah, exactly. And to break it down to simplistic terms, a lot of times when you're going over an IP-based network, it's not point to point, right? In the old days, you'd well, in the analog days, you'd chase a wire and do I have continuity and was there dropout or a bad amplifier?
Yeah.
And in a TDM network, you kind of followed a similar path, and I had a bad card at the CO. But there's a lot of error mitigation capabilities today, but you really need to know what's happening to the network to determine what's the best way to overcome it. If you're taking particular hits that are time-based, you may want to have multiple streams and offset them in time so that the right packets, enough of the packets get through that they get to the end. Forward error correction can work in some cases. But the product that came out of this, and this was the context of their paper, is an application we call Live Look that allows you to take a look at actually what's happening on the network and help you understand what type of packet loss you're getting so you can set up the right type of correction. Without seeing what's going on in the network, it's a little bit of a shot in the dark. I mean, yeah, lots of codecs have some ways to protect the signal, but without knowing what problem you're trying to solve, you just tend to dial in solutions which may or may not solve the problem. So that's kind of the practical application. You almost might think of it as a way to look inside the cloud and see where the bits are being hit, that you can set up your error mitigation around that.
I should put a link to. I love this paper. It had some ideas in it about packet loss that were pretty interesting, including this notion of the four-state Markov model, which I had not heard of before. But after it was described, it made good sense, and just to help characterize whether it's a bursty packet loss or a random packet loss, and
exactly
how long those losses typically were, and so what kind of mitigation to apply to that based on what it is. The easy way, I guess, to mitigate this is just to send two streams over diverse paths, but that is also the most expensive way to go about it. Maybe there's other ways to pretty well mitigate the type of loss that you have.
Well, yeah, and you're right. So two diverse paths is great redundancy, but even two diverse streams can go over the same path but be time delayed, such that if you're getting a hit that's happening, I'm making this up, every 10 seconds, when the 10-second hit comes, the packets out of stream 1 are not the same packets in stream 2 because you've got a certain amount of offset, and then you've got a jitter buffer at the end that can help with stream splicing, bring these pieces together. So there's a lot of tricks in the bag, so to speak, with IP Link that allow you to use really cost-effective public networks to get your content from here to there.
I wonder, Chris, you and I haven't talked much about this specifically, but do you have some cases that you can identify and speak about in terms of the type of packet loss you experienced setting something up and what you're able to do about it?
Well, the losses I've run into have been on a couple of public networks at sports pubs. And the codecs I used mentioned what Rich was saying about stream splicing and the time delay going over the same path, but the packets arriving differently. So we took advantage of the jitter buffer settings, and that basically all the little tricks in the boxes that you can play with in this environment, which was a ad hoc sporting event. We made use of. It was on a cable modem that was also being used for the Wi-Fi in the pub. The video coming in for some Comcast thing, and then there was something with Optimum Online with Cablevision, all coming on one pipe, and we were this little sliver of audio going out, and it worked, but we had to play with the buffers and make sure everything was kept an eye on it, but it worked really well. The trick is, and Rich is right, you have to now look at packet switched networks as very different and giving you options you didn't think were available, and you can do it really well if you only have one way out of a place.
Chris, I think you said that really well. What's obvious to me is that we really are, as we've been preaching for a while, not only moving into, but are living in an IP-based world. And, not everybody's moved to it yet. That's fine. There's still plenty of, perfectly viable technologies that are not IP that people are still using, and that's fine. But if you're going to move into IP, and you're going to have to move some things on in there, you need to know how to mitigate problems when they come up. You have a lot. On the one hand, you have less guarantee than you ever had before, but you actually have a lot more control and choice than you ever had before. And knowing how to apply remedies and where to apply a second connection and knowing how to apply the technology that exists in various manufacturers' products, knowing that and applying that will end up resulting in you having really good broadcasts and great reliability and terrific sound and all the good stuff we want. But you got to learn how and know how to apply that stuff. Rich, tell me where I'm wrong. Was that about right?
No, I think you're spot on, and that's the thing that just is you guys were saying. There's a lot more capabilities today that don't rely on you having to have separate discrete networks. So, where in the past, it may have been that back to kind of your original point of seeing certain gear at certain size stations. I wouldn't say there's no excuse, but there's plenty of opportunity, irrespective of market size or budget, that you can deploy technology to have reliable broadcasts and links using IP networks. It's very, very flexible, and kind of some of the previous perceptions people might have had, or even experiences that someone might have had 3 or 4 years ago. There's a lot of technology today, and certainly we have it in IP link, that allows you to mitigate that and take advantage of readily available networks.
So for the last few minutes, we've been talking about some of the IP transport products at GatesAir. By the way, the website is GatesAir.com. And, I've just been too swamped to go to that website for quite a while. So this is one reason I want to get Rich on the show, to actually selfishly bring me up to date on what's going on there. We're going to continue talking about transmitters and huge efficiency. I'm really wanting to hear about the water-cooled transmitters, because I'm not a TV guy, not a TV transmission guy. So that's where, water cool has always been in my world. So I want to hear about water-cooled FM transmitters coming up. But I think, Rich, if you don't mind, we ought to pivot to talk about audio consoles and routing systems for a few minutes.
Sure.
You guys have made a system for some time, a TDM-based system, and gorgeous equipment, very well designed. And I understand, though, that there's becoming, now that there's this AES 67 standard, GatesAir has been adding AES 67 capability in there.
Yeah, absolutely. For a long time, we've had the PRNE, what used to be Pacific Research and Engineering product line, that's been part of Harris and GatesAir for about 17 years now. About 7 out of the top 10 radio stations in the U.S. actually use our products to create and play out their content. So, so there's a lot of people that count on their, the revenue to be covered by us. And so that was one of the things as we got moving into what the right technology was. As you were, even talking earlier, first it all starts with the operator, right? The talent, the operator. You need to have a type of facility and a work surface and controls that don't hinder them, that allow them to be creative, allow people to deliver their message. And that's kind of where we've really shined. And the technology under the hood, it started with TDM, after the analog days. And then now, with our VM Express IP, you're able to use AES 67 for seamless connection to automation systems, telephone hybrids. And as you guys know, the type of connectivity is really growing there of things that you can connect to. So it really makes your connections a lot simpler. I mean, for a long time, even in the analog days, we had migrated over to using Cat5 for wiring. The idea of having to run, 8451 everywhere and big multi-trunk cables and heat shrink and all these things that we all used to do and be really proud of the great job we did, really got a lot simpler over time with Cat5 and, wire that had great common mode rejection. And so the step to IP was really the next logical step. And so that's, it's just very, very flexible. And it can do intercoms and mixing and, mix minuses and multiple control surfaces and pretty much any application, whether it's, one of the big guys in New York City or our Oasis console, which is, ideal for small markets everywhere.
You mentioned Belden 8451 wire. And, there was a time in my contracting career, Chris, I bet you can identify when I got so good at stripping and heat shrinking and connecting 8451, and I guess for a few years I was just in wire heaven. I was really good at it, and I trained a few guys to also make neat wiring, and I've had my fill of 8451 at this point in my life, and I'm so glad tend to be dealing with Cat5 cable. Chris, how do you feel about that?
No, I could sympathize with that. I mean, I had my days of 8451, West Penn 291. What else do we have? I had a few others.
Oh
out there.
yeah, West Penn.
Yes.
Yeah, West
And,
Penn always came on the metal reels though, didn't it?
Yes, I have one in front of me. I can't grab it though.
I dropped one of those on my foot one time on the rim. I didn't really like the metal reels much after that.
No, that's well, you got to be careful. Safety on the workplace. That's what you got to practice.
Yeah, that sounds like an OSHA problem.
Yeah.
I want
nowadays, now it's all about Cat 5 connectors and making them.
Well,
right.
I said OSHA problem. I did all of this work in Kentucky. That's miles from the OSHA.
Yes. Good point. Well, you mentioned kind of in your heyday there. I tell this example of, early on when I was first working, I had never seen, it was the first time I'd seen punch blocks, insulation displacement. And I was pretty excited about this hey, this is cool. I can punch down wires. It cuts it off. It makes the connection. Yeah. And in hindsight, I had told someone, I said, I had been kind of hoodwinked like Tom Sawyer and his friends whitewashing the fence, because the engineer I was working with had thought, here's a kid that's interested in punching down blocks. And he goes, I got the perfect project for you. Here's 37 trunks coming into a rack room. You'll get to punch all this down yourself. And I'm like, really? So in hindsight, it was a little bit like, I don't think it had the appeal I thought it had.
Oh, man. It's like a friend I heard
made you
of.
a better person as a result.
Well,
yes.
yes, you could say that. I also learned to be careful listening with headphones, because somebody else might think that that's an okay place to run 110 volts.
Oh. Yeah, you ran into that too, huh?
Oh, yeah.
I think we all have.
Yeah,
I think
exactly. What's this lamp cord go to?
Yeah. Or what we typically found, you've ruined some diagonal cutters on Belden 8451 that somebody decided to run 110 volts over.
Well, it's okay to run the on-air light on that.
Exactly.
Try that with 25 pair cable. 25 telephone cable. And I had a pair of diagonals explode in my hand and put the metal right through the front panel of a small circuit board. Yep, it was fun.
Oh, outstanding.
It was a learning experience.
Yeah.
How about the turntable motor coming over 8451 up into the console to the back of the key lever switch?
Ah, nice.
Oh yes. That's another classic.
You open the console on a hot, sweaty day. You got your hands down there working, and the tender part of your forearm hits 110.
Gets zorched. Yeah.
Oh. Oh, man. Yeah, we've all been there. Wow. So, Rich, you mentioned the console technologies and how AES-67's been added to those, and I see that the name is I see the name Flexiva being used quite a bit on the GatesAir website. Tell me about that name or that branding. What's that got to do with?
Yeah, Flexiva is kind of an overarching brand. It's primarily around our radio transmitters. So Maxiva is our family of television transmitters for VHF and UHF television transmitters. Flexiva is an overarching brand that covers all our radio transmission products and to a certain extent the studio products, and then the Interplex products are all the IP, TDM, and RF transport products.
Okay. Hey, real quick, let's talk about furniture. For a lot of folks, that's kind of some people get really excited about furniture. Others are.
Did you mean like couches and things like that?
Yeah, exactly. Every control room needs a couch. No, maybe that's a bad idea. There's been some bad things happening.
Some certainly do, yeah.
So,
studio furniture's one of those areas that, ergonomics is a big thing. It's kind of like we were talking about. The technology's a great enabler, but it's really all about enabling the talent, whether it be, a music program, a morning show, a talk show, whatever it might be. It's just the tool to give them the environment to go deliver the message, because nobody really listens to the radio to determine this is the one that's got the lowest or the best signal to noise, right? And in furniture, durability, looks, and functionality are really important. And to be able to get all three parts of that triangle in a cost-effective manner can be kind of a challenge. And that's an area where I think over time we've had some pretty good success, whether it be, some simple designs that go in some very small or either small physically or smaller market facilities. or more complex environments that go in very large market facilities. So having the right type of tools really applies to more than just the electronics and IP connectivity and transmission. It's all about having the right workflow, and that's an area where our designers will help lay out the right type of cabinets that people need in a room. We can fabricate them, and we also provide turnkey services. So as part of our studio console line, some of our customers like to have us turnkey the project, or maybe just pre-wire and prep it for them, and then we can ship it to them. So it kind of speeds things up. So yeah, it's an area that we certainly spend some time on. We've got some great capabilities there, and people generally enjoy working in the studios that we've been able to design for them.
I'm going to guess that if somebody purchases a console, a GatesAir Flexiva console, and then purchases studio furniture for it, that the console's going to fit perfectly into that furniture. That's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, usually you don't need to worry about it being too big or too small. Absolutely. And, the next part of it is, do you have wireways in the right place, and where are you going to connect things? Do you have the right type of airflow? There's a whole series of questions we'll ask as part of it. And, there's simple things like, in some cases, guys like to put the mixing console where it's really close to the front of the desk.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is, if I have a piece of paper I want to place down, I end up having to put it on top of the on buttons and the fader. So leaving enough room for a piece of paper to fit between the front of the table and where the console is, for example, is one of those small things that gives the talent a place to put the tools that they're using, but still get to the control that allows them to make their show.
I sure wish that we could solve. Chris Tobin, maybe you have, because you've solved so many other problems. Solve the keyboard problem in control rooms. Now, I know you can get the little drawer to go underneath, and that's okay. Some people place the keyboards in that space between the edge of the counter, where your belly goes, and the edge of the audio console. Chris, Rich, you guys have any solutions for that?
Well, let's see. I use touchscreen.
Oh, did we lose Chris? All right, we'll come back to Chris in just a minute. Rich, you were about to jump in too.
Yeah, I was, kind of following on Chris's point. Touchscreen is a great way that allows you to avoid using other control surfaces. Mm-hmm. In some cases, it's consolidating down. Every device doesn't need to be on its own keyboard. The use of a KVM router to be able to share screens and keyboards across multiple computing devices is one way to kind of clean up the mess.
Chris, you're back now. You were about to say?
Yeah, it's interesting what's going on here when we do a split screen. Anyway, touchscreen is one, and then I followed that up with the console was wide enough there in the center where the announcer would be. We had a blank space, and we had a machinist make a little cutout, and that way we put the keyboard right in there. So it was level with the faders and everything else. It worked out very well.
I remember that. That was an amazing design where the keyboard was in the console, but it was you picked a fairly narrow, in terms of width, keyboard for that, didn't you?
Yes. Well, we didn't need the access to the keyboard wasn't on a regular basis. It was just an occasional changing a few things. So we went with a smaller footprint. It wasn't a standard 102 keyboard, and it worked just fine. As Rich pointed out, a lot of times it's the workflow. So I've worked in many studios, and recently in one that they have the keyboard, they put it to the side, and all the jock needs to worry about is using a mouse to click around on the screen. So you got to look at workflow. That's the key. Some places just get lazy and they throw keyboards all over the place. It's like, really? I've been in a couple of places recently. I'm like, okay, which keyboard do you use? Well, it's the one on the left. You've got 3 of them there. They're not labeled. So which one on the left? I was like, come on. I'm trying to help you out, and this is getting crazy. So you can just imagine what a jock must go through, trying to do something.
Exactly.
Wow. When do we get to the Minority Report keyboard? Where you just wave your hands and look around, and do you have to wear the special glove for that to work? Maybe. I think you do. I think you have to have the glove with the the conductivity fingertips. Hey, we are talking with Rich Redmond here on This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, along with Chris Tobin. Chris is at a transmitter site high atop a building in New York City. Chris, in a few minutes, can you give us a little short tour of the equipment behind you? Would that be possible?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That should be be appropriate for our guests to have a transmitter site in the background.
Sure,
this has got to be the quietest transmitter site I've ever heard there, Chris. That's pretty good.
It's the microphone.
Chris has good microphones, too.
I practice audio. It's something I do on my night job.
And our guest is Rich Redmond with GatesAir. Rich is the Chief Product Officer. I never heard that title before, but I like it. Hey, our show is brought to you in part by the folks at Telos and the Telos Zip 1. The Zip 1 is an IP audio codec. We were talking about IP codecs earlier. Well, Telos has had their own out for a little while. It's the Zip 1, and this is an amazing, amazing little box. I just love this thing. I've got one, in the rack here right next to me, and I was just using it earlier today. You may remember, if you follow me on Facebook or you follow Telos on Facebook, you know about this IP radio link that we've been able to put up. And it's not that it's really special. Other people have done it too. I'm not like the first or anything. But we have this IP radio link between our radio studios in Greenville, Mississippi, and 13 miles away in a little wide spot in the road called Heads, Mississippi, we have a 650-foot tower. And right now we have just one transmitter at that tower, but we're getting ready to expand that to 4 FM transmitters at that tower site. And we need to get, lots of audio out there. So we decided, hey, the thing to do is to use our existing Axia IP audio network that's at the radio studio and just extend it 13 miles out to the transmitter site using an IP radio. And we chose the Ubiquity Air Fiber, and then we put an Axia X node out there. So we've got 4 stereo channels of super high quality linear audio showing up out there. Well, where does Zip 1 fit into this? Well, I've been wanting to monitor and listen to that for quality. I want to hear if there's any dropouts, any problems at all. So what I do is we route all that audio. We're not on the air with them yet. We're just testing them. We route them all back to the studio. And at the studio, we have a Zip 1, just like this one right here. And I just get on my Zip 1. In fact, it's connected right now. I just get on my Zip 1 and call that Zip 1. And it's a 7-hour drive from where I'm sitting right now. Yet I can hear in beautiful quality. I could turn it to linear if I wanted to, but I don't want to use up all the station's bandwidth. So we're doing like AAC at 320 kilobits per second. I can hear the audio coming back, and I know I can listen to it all day long, listen to my own radio stations, but I can at the same time check that quality. Well, that's a utilitarian use of the Telos Zip 1. What else is it good for? Well, it's good for STL. Plenty of radio stations are using Zip 1s as their full-time studio to transmitter link. And unlike, the STLs we've been used to for years and years in broadcast, this is not just one way. It's two-way. So you can hook it to a mod monitor at the transmitter site and bring that audio back. Maybe you want to listen to the post-processed audio and bring that back. Maybe you have something like, hey, if you're still doing something like a Marty receiver or, some kind of RPU receiver at the transmitter site, you can bring that audio back in just beautiful quality. Maybe you have a satellite dish at the transmitter site. You need to bring that audio back. No matter what you got to bring back, you can bring it back. Maybe a two-way radio for your traffic reporter or doing remotes. Lots of possibilities exist with the Telos Zip 1. And it was really designed to work over almost any internet connection. It's got built-in mitigation capabilities to mitigate, the occasional dropouts, occasional changes in bit rate, has automatic bit rate adjustment, automatic buffering adjustment. And the other thing you can do with it, of course, is live broadcast remotes. Sometime I'll tell you the story about doing live remotes with Lightning 100 here in Nashville. They'd go to either a live music venue or a pizza place or a concert on the green sort of event and plug in their Zip 1 to a 4G type modem situation where that's their internet connection, and bam, go on the air with low latency, live broadcast, full stereo, 20 kilohertz audio, sounding really good. All kinds of possibilities exist for the Zip 1. So I'd like you to go check it out if you would. Go to telosalliance.com and look under the Telos banner, and you'll see the link to audio codecs. And there you go with the Zip 1. By the way, the Zip 1 now comes standard with not only analog connections, but digital AES3 connections. And, of course, it has LiveWire built into it as well. So there's a network connection built onto the Zip 1 also. Check it out, the Zip 1 from the Telos Alliance. I love it. And thanks very much, Telos, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, guys. Hey, now's a good time for a quick tour. Chris, if you're up to it, could you just walk us through a few things in the rack? And remember, not everybody watching the show is a transmitter engineer.
That's right. So we'll do this very carefully. So using my half-inch Heliax as a pointer with an end connector on the end. Why not, right? Let's have some fun. We're at an RF site. So we look at the first thing we have here at the top of the rack is a HD radio modulation monitor from TWiRT, model M2. And then just below that is a routing switcher, a little analog switcher router from Broadcast Tools. And then we have the infamous, not infamous, but the famous Duro model 1200B metering. See if we have any audio we can put on there. There we go. So now you get your peak reading and average loudness, relative loudness, peak modulation. Then we have another box below that for the processing of the radio station audio, both for analog and HD. It's some funky little box with 2 little meters on it. Oh, that's right. It's an Omnia 6 EXI. It works pretty well, so it's not a bad little thing. And then just below that, for their HD 2 and 3, we have Omnia 1s operating for that limited bandwidth, or I guess you'd say limited bandwidth audio channels.
Limited bitrate, yeah. Limited bitrate.
Yeah, and then there's another IP codec below that. And then we have a set of BDI switches, Broadcast Devices Incorporated. So for those of you in the Northeast, that would be Bob Tarcio. And it's an AES routing switcher, AES EBU switcher, and everything in the plant is AES. The only analog is actually used for monitoring certain stuff and just for, pretty much monitoring some quality control, but AES throughout the plant. And the audio paths coming in on an Intraplex just below. I don't know if you can see it in the video. No, just out of frame. Well, there is an Intraplex, STL HD just below. And on that comes up the HD, or is the studio audio, HD 2 and 3. And that is backed up by a IP codec. We have 2 paths coming into this facility. One is on a T1 terrestrial through the local phone carrier. And then the other path is through an ISP, which actually uses, this is a point of presence in this building. So we're right at the POP, which is nice. It's sort of like being at the central office. And their interconnectivity is through fiber, 3 different fiber companies, and a microwave link as well. So we've got a lot of redundancy on that link.
You know, I've always wanted a facility that's in the same building as a telecom point of presence. Listen, we could just take a little tap off of here, can't we, and get a little bandwidth? Because it's just right here.
Well, that's pretty much how it works here. The cable run is literally 1 floor above us, and it's no more than 75 feet away, so it's perfect.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yes, it's great. So it's nice having an ISP in the building with you, and it's also nice to know that we're in a building shared with many services that require certain phone company or carriers to make sure everything here is 5 nines of reliability. So it's very convenient. And let's see if you have in the other frame, if we can see. Oh, yeah, well, look at that. We can see the ARC Plus remote control from Burke, which is used for the 2 transmitters, and it utilizes the SNMP trapping available for the transmitters. And then there's 2 Burke Plus connects, 1 for each transmitter. And we have another BDI switcher. This is a cool switcher. I like this one. It works really well. I'll say it's almost bulletproof in the sense that it just runs. It's what's called the SWP200 switch controller. It's the RF switch controller. So you actually can switch it'll switch your transmitters for you, give you plates on, plates off. We'll use the old term. It senses the RF. There is a sensor in line to your antenna, so it knows when there's RF going forward or reverse, and it will switch and let you know there's a problem. And it's really cool. That's all it does. That's its only job, which is great. So it's not sitting there running other processes in the background and doing anything crazy. And I've actually witnessed this work on several occasions. And on the air, you'd never even know it. It's quick. It works. And it goes into manual mode, so it doesn't go back and forth. So if it gets any false sensing, it won't do it. So it forces you to come up and check on your transmitter site and say, hey, something's gone wrong. So it's really nice.
Make sure it's not a transmitter on fire. Yeah.
That's right. You don't want that. And then I have another IP codec I'm actually evaluating for a customer or a client, I should say. This one's from Digigram. It's called the Ikoya. Pretty cool box. That's the yellow one on the top of the racks. That's why it's not in the rack. It's just up here for evaluation. And that's about it. And then there's a KVM switch panel here for all the computers because we have the importer and exporter here co-located here at the site. This particular HD setup does not have them separated, so they're co-located. And then there's the BDI composite mixer DA for the analog portions of our FM transmitters. So we split the composites and pass them all around. And then a couple of subcarrier generators down below. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell, without getting too crazy.
And since you're in market number 1 in the U.S., there's a lot of business that goes through those racks, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Yes. Yeah, you're talking several dozen dollars per minute.
several dozen dollars, yes.
Several dozen dollars per minute. So you got to make sure everything is always ready to go for that backup and switching back and forth. Matter of fact, this particular facility, every 3 months, will switch transmitters and run for 3 months on the backup, and then switch paths and do the same thing just to, make sure everything is in order and have a little portable HD radio that I could listen to HD 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Insignia is not available anymore, this particular model, but
I've got one over on the shelf over there, yeah.
It's really sensitive. I travel on the commuter rails, and I can actually hear the station when I'm in Pennsylvania Station, New York. I can listen to several HD carriers. It's pretty cool.
Wow. Even though you're down low with train levels?
Well, yes, that's what's fascinating. And just the other day, I was going out to GFQ Networks in Queens. I was on a Long Island Railroad car in Penn Station on track 21, and I'm sitting listening to Z100, what do you call it, KTU 1035 in HD. I was like, wow, this is a very sensitive little sucker. It's good.
Yeah. Being underground. Wow. Amazing. Yeah, so that signal's coming right down the escalator, right down to the train tracks.
That's pretty much it, because if you look forward, the tunnel is way ahead, so there's no way it's coming through the tunnel.
Yeah. Wow. Maybe it's the train tracks. I was told with my AM station I should run a couple ground wires out to the train tracks that were nearby, and that would make my AM work better. FM's the same way, right?
Well, I wouldn't recommend connecting anything to the railroad tracks, because these days with the communication-based train control, you might find yourself running into a shocking experience.
Oh, there you go. That's right. That's right. So, Rich, so talking about HD and its penetration, that was pretty interesting and dovetails nicely into what you were telling me earlier about improvements available in your HD products, and how, hey, a station that began with HD some years ago, they may have a way to get more power using some existing Harris Gates gear.
Yeah, absolutely. As Chris had mentioned, getting the right type of HD power to get the penetration beyond just in a car, out in, an area where there's not a lot of buildings and structure and so forth is important. And so a lot of people have found over time, I want to start looking at a different sideband level. So, everything launched at about 20 dB sideband or 1% of power. And there's a move for some stations to be able to increase. Well, one of the things that we've done over time is obviously invent new products that have better capabilities. So today's Flexiva fax exciter, which is a 50 or 150 watt exciter, 2RU box, is where the both the analog signal, so if you're on 99.5, it creates the 99.5 signal digitally and puts it out, and you can send audio through it just like any FM station. If you want to run HD radio, there's an XGen card that plugs in, and it takes content from the exporter and importer, creates the sidebands, the OFDM sidebands, and it also has some very powerful correction to correct the amplifiers in the transmitters to deal with, to be more linear, to pass the digital signal, or to deal with the nonlinearity. And so that includes things such as crest factor reduction, which helps reduce the amount of digital peaks so you can get higher average power. It can do things such as real-time adaptive correction and so forth. But the real takeaway is if you'd bought a transmitter like one of our Z10 transmitters, let's say, that was running HD radio and FM simultaneously, it was set up for -20, and now you're looking and saying, well, geez, I'd like to run more power. The advancements we made in the new exciter actually can take most people who are running at -20 and get them to -14, simply by swapping out the exciter. No change in the amplifier, no change in having to get a bigger transmitter, but the digital correction is that much more powerful that by doing a simple exciter swap out, you can actually get a pretty significant power increase. And so we've got a trade-in program there. So if you've got some older gear, you'd like to trade in against it with some special pricing. It's a really cost-effective way to not only get your main analog channel sounding the best it can be, but also getting more HD power to get that type of performance that Chris was talking about.
Certainly most of our viewers and listeners, if they're already running HD, if you're an engineer for an HD radio station, you're probably aware of what is possible here. But some years ago, the FCC began to allow people to go from this minus 20 dB signal. So you've got the main carrier, the FM carrier, and the HD carriers were at minus 20 dB. So that's 1% of the power. They did some experimenting to see, will this cause more interference? And in most cases, it does not. So they allowed stations to go up to, was it minus 14? So 6 more dB.
Yeah, potentially all the way to minus 10, but certainly to minus 14.
Yeah, and so this, and I guess one thing that brought that about was in real world situations, people were noticing that, well, when I'm driving around, my HD signal seems to drop out before my analog signal is really done for when I'm driving away, or my penetration into a building is not as good as I'd like to be with the HD, but it's okay with the analog. And so this just gets the two on a. I mean, it's still just a fraction of the percentage of the analog power, but it does get the HD up to a higher power level for better penetration and more distance for people driving away. So that was cool. But the fear was, well, now I got to buy new transmitters. And you're saying that because of cool technology in the crest factor, for example, that it might be possible for people to do
absolutely. We've had a ton of guys who've been able to increase the capability there. The other benefit has come. And this is really true whether you're running HD or not. But, a lot of times when you're talking about how do I make my station pop on the dial, how do I really get that signature sound? As Chris took us through the transmitter site there, great audio processors like the Omnia gear works great, but it's going through something. And if you've got a weak STL link, so if I'm running an old analog STL or I'm running a digital STL that's using lossy compression, or the piece that a lot of times people forget is the exciter in the transmitter. In its day, a Harris Digit exciter was the one to have the best sound. Over time, we made a lot of improvements. So even if you're a guy who's running analog, HD sometime in your future, doing an exciter swap out, it can be like getting a new processor on your station. So it's certainly not one of those areas to be overlooked.
That's a good point. I agree completely. And Chris, maybe you can speak to this as well. Hey, back in when I was doing so much engineering in the 80s and 90s, hey, I was excited about exciter swap outs at radio stations because I knew that the next generation of analog technology was better than what I was replacing. And then we got to digital with the original Harris Digit exciter, and then Harris figured out even things they could do better with those. So even if you're not HD, Rich, I guess you're saying that a swap out to the latest exciter that is HD capable will make your analog sound better in almost all cases.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We've had guys in markets of all size take advantage of this. Now, sometimes it's because they had a failure and then they put the rig in and they go, oh my God, my station just sounds so much better. And other times guys are a little more proactive and will want to check it out. So, certainly if it's something you're thinking about, you can get with one of our guys and we can do a loan and you can try it out and so forth. But generally what guys end up finding is you're able to get a more competitive signal. You see it in places like the definition, the highs are a little bit crisper. You get a more defined bass, you get better stereo imaging, and you really get the most out of the audio processor, for example, you've made an investment in. So if you bought one of the leading audio processors and you want to make sure you get the most out of it, it's really important to make sure you put your best foot forward with a great exciter. And you can give a lot of life to a transmitter that you've had for some time with a relatively small investment.
Chris, I know you got to agree with that. What have you found in the field there about exciter replacement or upgrades?
Absolutely. And those of us who remember the day of pre-distortion and exciters and stuff will remember that your audio quality was only as good as the pre-distortion you did. Moving forward, if you have a newer technology, more flatness, I'll call it, you definitely will get the best out of whatever processor you're running. And you'll probably be able to get a little more peak control, which means you can get a little more loudness, as we all know. Because if you had, like I did at one radio station, it was a rock and roll station, we had Harris FM transmitters. However, they were using an RCA exciter. And those of you who remember those RCA exciters were kind of wobbly when it came to carrier shift.
Wobbly, that's a great word for it. Yes.
But wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey type of stuff. And I have to say, we only had it there for a short time when I arrived at the job, because I lobbied to get rid of it very quickly. But until I did, I will say, and this is a name for some of us, I guess it's probably Northeast, but if you keep up in the journals, Grady Motes. Grady
Yeah.
came up with a modification for those RCA exciters I'll never forget. Came up to the site one day. He handed me a little bag of diodes and a little piece of paper. He says, "Give this a try. Tell me what you think." And program director was very happy with the way things sounded, and we were able to be a little more competitive. And then that made my case to go to corporate and get a new exciter. So it worked out very nicely. And that Harris transmitter then had a Harris exciter product in it. So it was nice because I still couldn't figure out why and find paperwork that explained I have a nice Harris FM transmitter cranking away with an RCA excited, what's circa 1970s, maybe 1980s. I'm going, something doesn't sound right here, but we made it work. But those, it's war stories. That's the kind of stuff that's fun. But I will definitely agree. The newer exciters, and Rich is absolutely right. The audio chain, or the process from the beginning, say from the microphone to the output of your automation system, whether it's music or audio, spoken word, all the way through until the RF amplifier spits out those electrons. You need to look at every element. There is something to be said for that. And even if you're not doing HD, don't worry about it. Get a new digital exciter and go for it. You'll find out that you can squeeze out a few extra, half a dB here and there and be competitive.
Rich, we got to cover one more quick subject before we go to our last break, and that is a water-cooled FM transmitter. Tell me about this. I know nothing about water-cooled transmitters, but this sounds pretty cool, and it looks pretty compact.
Yeah, it sure is. And I think kind of you mentioned it earlier. For a lot of us who grew up in radio, liquid cooling was always this thing that happened typically on UHF TV transmitters with klystrons, and somebody was always mopping up some spill, and there were these big drums of stuff everywhere, and there were these 10 horsepower pumps in the corner, and it seemed like you had to be as much of a mechanical engineer as knowing anything about electronics. And then you had high voltage next to the water and distilled loops. All that stuff's ancient history. It's the days of a science fair project are really over. So because of part of what we do is in television, television, which has inherently been less efficient, even in the analog days, the efficiency, in FM transmitter tube days, you could get in the 60%, 70% efficiencies. And I'm not talking PA efficiency. I mean, energy in to energy out. And in solid state now we can get, 72% efficient, very good in air cooled. But in TV, analog days, it might have been, 40%, 50%. And in digital, the early digital rigs, it was 15%. So 85% of the energy you took in went out as heat. Only 15% went up the antenna. So a lot of innovation went into how do you extract that heat in something like liquid? How do you get it out in an industrial manner to heat exchangers? And so for some time now, we've had hot pluggable modules, separate power supplies, and so forth in television that have a make before break type liquid connectors, so you can really hot plug a module just like you do. And we've taken that technology to our Flexiva FLX transmitter. So if you're familiar in air-cooled, FAX is the FM, air-cooled, and X for X-mitter or transmitter. And the FLX is a liquid-cooled version. Same type of amplifiers, same type of super high-efficiency power supplies. But now we're actually taking the heat that comes from the devices, instead of going into a heat sink and blow air across it, it goes into a chiller plate, and we evacuate the heat via liquid. And so the liquid is you might think of it like antifreeze you might have in a car, an automotive antifreeze mixture, and it goes out to a heat exchanger outside. And this allows us to get a significant amount of heat out of the building. And you can go, well, okay, Rich, that sounds kind of complex. And you said it's not a science fair project. Maybe it's better, but so where's the payoff? The payoff is really in what a lot of guys have found is becoming the biggest maintenance. It's the air conditioners. I mean, you talk to guys, whether they're in big markets or smaller markets, if you're running any sort of cooling at your transmitter site, you're spending way more money replacing compressors, having the air conditioning guys come out and do maintenance. You have to have backup air conditioners in, because if you lose one and you're in an all hot environment, then the building gets too hot and the gear shuts down. So by taking that biggest amount of heat generator, which is generally the transmitter, and taking it outside, you end up saving an awful lot in energy costs, and specifically energy cooling costs. And where we really started to see this come through were guys who are now starting to run, like we just talked a little bit before about how do you get more HD power out of your facility. So those guys who wanted to go to -10, who wanted to go to -14 or more, the transmitter becomes less efficient because you need it to be more linear to get more digital power. So now you're starting to approach the 50-some% efficiency that says if I need 10 kilowatts, out of the pipe, I'm throwing that much into the room.
Yeah.
And so it really starts to become a factor where the energy efficiency can quickly pay for a new transmitter, because otherwise you're running your air conditioning costs, the transmitter cooling, and then the maintenance of those. And I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure, Chris, you've had sites that have had, managing air conditioners it's a big cost and a big deal.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I've talked to a few folks who I've worked with an engineering firm that does a lot of TV work. So I have worked on Klystrons with the water cooling process and the glycol in the early days, and the efficiencies behind it and how it functions is really cool. And to apply it as GatesAir is doing with the transmitters, I think is even better. So if I had my druthers, building a new site, I would definitely go for the water cooled approach and take advantage of that. And because the air conditioning costs, I could tell you, in 2 sites over the years, we must have spent probably the cost of a new transmitter in maintenance and just preventive maintenance and maintenance because of the heat changing conditions. Because the older transmitter, which was the backup, was a little hotter than the newer solid state. So when we had to run the backup, it did stress the HVAC a bit.
Rich, tell me about the noise level in a liquid-cooled transmitter. What fans still exist inside them, if any?
Yeah, there's a little bit of fans for flushing air, so you still have some components that you want to move some air across. And one of the things we did, and this is something that we really revolutionized in radio and brought to television, was we're the first guys really to start using the hot pluggable telecom type power supplies. So if you went into a central office for years, 100 years ago, right, there were stacks of batteries and there was this 48 volt DC everywhere. Well, it matches up nicely that the type of devices today, 50 volt devices in both radio and TV transmitters, these supplies are ideal for. And so we've been taking advantage of these high efficiency, they're 96% efficient AC to DC supplies. And they're also very small. They're about, a couple inches wide. So you can get if I told you could put a almost 3 kilowatt power supply and it would be smaller than a loaf of bread and you could put it in your hand. And that if it failed, you simply flip the front, pull it out and plug another one in. Anyone who's changed a plate transformer would, be screaming heresy. Yes. But, this technology is still air cooled. But there's so little heat that gets dumped through it. It's got, modulated fans that match up with the energy consumption. So you move a little bit of air through it, but the benefits in reliability, because the other option is I have this big heat sink, I put RF devices on it, and then I also might want to put a power supply on it to cool it. It ends up it makes your maintenance so much more complex and difficult. And we all know that it's not like we have guys camped out at transmitter sites anymore. You see something on the remote control. Maybe I'm a contract guy and I've got 10 or more stations to go to. I need soft failure. And when I get there, I need to be able to quickly swap stuff out, get it back and going, and I'll either repair it in my shop or I'll do an exchange. And that's really the path we've gone down. Is these supplies are super reliable. Been through all the testing for the telecom space, very efficient, and it flushes a little bit of air through. But the big savings most of the heat comes from the RF devices, and we extract all the heat via liquid. So it's gotten really simple. And, I have to say, we've been fortunate to partner with a great customer of ours at Cox. And, they were integral in helping define what the product was, being the first site for it, and really having that forward vision to try to take a more greener look at how they run their facilities.
I would be so excited about getting that huge amount of airflow out of my transmitter buildings, just getting that heat outside and letting Mother Nature, of course there's fan assist out there, but keeping all that intake
absolutely
and out and exhaust air outside, and inside I've got a minimal amount of cooling to do at that point. That would really be awesome. especially
Well, and
in
it makes
Mississippi.
talking on the phone a lot easier as well at the transmitter
Yes.
site, because
Yes.
you're not trying to compete with this enormous blower. As anyone who went deaf standing next to an FM 25K can tell you,
There
some
you go.
transmitters get particularly loud. Yeah, I
That's the
think
transmitter.
Chris has spent some time around those, I think.
You can, and I would again be excited about the level of dust reduction because it's so hard to properly filter all the stuff. And if you're in Mississippi and your transmitter's in the middle of a bean field or a cotton field, 2 or 3 times a year you've got combines and plows going by, and even if it's just dust. So
well, yeah, I mean, you're spot on. It's dust. It's the other place that can be really destructive is if you're anywhere near the ocean. So, if you've got salt air and if you're trying to flush outside air through your plant, over time you get corrosion, which shows up on finger stock. It shows up on contactors. I mean, any place that's going to collect dirt is also going to collect corrosion. And so then, the opposite of that is fine. I'm going to run air conditioners, keep it a closed loop system, which works, but then you're back to the maintenance and cost. So the benefits all the way around are pretty substantial. Yeah, it costs a little bit more to buy the box than it does an air-cooled transmitter because you're kind of buying part of the cooling system with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's certainly less than saying I'm buying a transmitter and I'm buying air conditioning for the site. And when you look at the total cost of ownership, it's far less expensive to run. And we have a payback analysis tool that can kind of help you run the comparison and take it to your management, or in some cases we have guys take it to the power company and you can get some rebate back from them for energy savings.
Well, I want to take your hot water and heat up my bath water for out there at the transmitter site.
You can do that as well.
Hey, we got to take a quick break. We'll be back. Both of you be ready with a tip of the week, and then we're going to have to go. Our show is brought to you in part by the folks at Axia and the Axia Fusion audio console. This thing is amazing. You know what? No matter how you need the console configured, you can do it. I put some math to it one time to figure out how many different possible configurations would there be of a Fusion console. How can you arrange the modules, small, large, stuff in the middle, phone controller or not phone controller, the full navigation monitor module or the half-size one, intercom module, all that. There's like 18,000 different permutations, 18,000 different ways to order an Axia Fusion console, and you just need to figure out how to order yours. So the modules come in groups of 4. So there's 4 fader modules. There's a telephone module that does complete telephone control for almost every Telos phone system. It's got 2 faders built in it. There's modules available for that are smart switches. So these are buttons that have labels on them that are computer controlled by the Pathfinder software. So you can have those change. You can even have menus on them if you like. There's also an intercom module, different sizes of intercom modules. Of course, blank panels if you want to give it a rest a little bit and have a blank panel right there. And there are dedicated film cap switches. So if you just want a dedicated button that costs less than the smart switches, you can do that as well. Lots of modules available for this console and lots of sizes. Some radio stations, control rooms, they're going to want a single great big console. Or maybe you want to split that console in 2 and put a monitor between them or an automation controller between them or just a copy stand. Or maybe you just need a smaller console or a medium console. Point is, any way you want to order a Fusion console, by golly, you've got it available to you. So anywhere, I think the smallest we can have is about a 6-fader console, 8 slots wide. Then it goes all the way up to, I want to say 20, 24, 28 slots. Huge, big console. You can almost not carry it yourself. And every fader module on a Fusion console has got an OLED display to show you in beautiful, bright, clear text what the source is, what the channel number is. Also, it'll give you confidence metering that's absolutely full-time. So you can see the audio coming into that fader, pre-fader level. You can see it coming in. Oh, yeah, there's audio coming from the traffic copter or from the remote reporter on the codec. You can also see the backfeed audio. That's the mix minus or the intercom audio, whatever it's going to be. The backfeed audio to that source, it's also full-time metered on the OLED. So lots of features are available, and plus a fantastic array of options for configuring the console. So you can make it do split feeds going out to a remote site. So you can provide the remote site with a full-time non-delayed, non-interrupted feed for their local PA speakers at the remote site. Plus, on the other channel, you can provide them with an interruptible feed, maybe preview or talkback, IFB, things like that can go back to the remote site that way. Just and that's relatively easy to set up, and for the jock, an operator using the console, man, it's all just automatic. You push the push-to-talk switch, and the right thing goes out to the remote site without interrupting their PA feed. So, I mean, that's just one possibility. You can even have remote talent do voice tracking for a show that's on the air now, and the console will do that simultaneously with doing the show that's on the air. The possibilities are absolutely amazing. I couldn't possibly go through them all with you right now, and you know what? I don't have to. You can go to the website. You can go to telosalliance.com and look for Axia and go to the Fusion console. When you do, over on the right-hand side of the Fusion product page, you're going to find some videos. And we take you through Fusion design, Fusion workflow, the introduction to Fusion, and a couple more videos as well to get you introduced to all the possibilities that the Fusion console can do. Yes, it's an AOIP console. It works with the power station. It also works with a standalone mixing engine and power supply. The possibilities are just absolutely amazing. Check it out if you would. The Axia Fusion console at telosalliance.com. Thanks very much, Axia, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, we got to hurry. Rich, can I put you on the spot for a tip of the week for our viewers?
Yeah, we were talking a little bit earlier about audio and about making sure you go through each of the segments of your air chain. And as Chris said, every single one is important. So my tip is, don't overlook, especially if you've got a wireless STL, a 950 link, or whatever the frequency might be. Don't overlook making sure that the transmitter and receiver are centered on frequency, because that's one of those things that you kind of forget about it over time. And, much along the lines of saying getting your exciter tuned up, if you're running a composite STL, for example, and the receiver's off a bit or the transmitter's off, you really can start to destroy all the great work that your audio processor has done. So checking those, getting them tuned up, you can make pretty significant improvements in how your station sounds.
That's the kind of thing that if you're having some audio problem due to that you might not think to track that down, and therefore it'd be a little difficult to track down. But if you think, I'm going to check these, then you'll know right away if that's a problem or not.
Absolutely.
Wow. Good advice. Good advice. All right. Chris Tobin, what's your tip for us this week? Got something?
Well, yeah, I'll dovetail the frequency counter concept for checking frequency. There's one right there. So keeping things on check. And what's very handy that people sometimes overlook is a drop light on a cord. One of the ones you mount in the ceiling. This one's mounted like.
All right, Chris. Oh no, we have trouble with Chris now. All right. Well, I'll chat for a sec, and we'll see if Chris comes back.
I guess the reason to have error mitigation on IP links.
Yeah, well, Chris does remotes from amazing places. Oh, Chris, go ahead. You're back. Go right ahead, buddy.
It has nothing to do with me. Trust me. Anyway, there's a drop light here in this facility that's come in very handy on many occasions. It's the ones you mount on the wall and you bring it around. It's really convenient. I've been in many facilities where we didn't have a drop light. I had to rely on a flashlight, and it was very annoying trying to balance a flashlight in a rack when this has a little hook.
Right.
Or you can just lay it on something. It's very convenient. So give it some thought. It's the simple things in life that make it better.
Chris Tobin, the Chuck Norris of engineers, drop packets flee from him.
Not always.
Well, you've done some remotes from amazing places. Guys, we got to go. Rich Redmond, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us. We got to have you back again. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was great anytime, guys. This was enjoyable. Thank you.
For us, too, I look forward to seeing you at NAB.
Absolutely.
And Chris Tobin, thanks for joining us from a most interesting secret place. Well, we know it's 4 Times Square, but that's about all we know.
Yeah, well, you still need several passes to get in anyway, so
that's true.
Security, so I'm okay.
Not like we could come up there and accost you.
No, there's no cosplay at this location, at least not without permission. Yeah, definitely. NAB will be fun. I'll see you out at NAB. And Rich will see you at NAB. It'll be good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, you've been watching This Week in Radio Tech, episode 294. Rich Redmond of GatesAir has been our guest, and Chris Tobin has been coming to us live from 4 Times Square in New York City. Thanks very much to Suncast for producing the show, doing a great job. We really appreciate that. And thanks to Andrew Zarian, founder of the GFQ Network. And there's lots of other great shows to watch there. Be sure you bookmark thisweekinradiotech.com. You can click one of the links to download the show automatically from whatever your favorite pod-catching program might be. And, hey, you're always welcome to send us an email through the website to give us a guest idea. And Rich mentioned, Chris mentioned Grady Moats earlier. I'm not sure we can get Grady on, but if he'd agree to it, that'd be great, too. All right, we got to go. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.